Welcome back to the Healthy Chicago podcast, where local health professionals and their guests discuss the latest public health issues affecting Chicagoans. All right. Well, welcome back, Chicago, to another episode of Healthy Chicago podcast. I'm your original and now occasional host, Dr. Brian Borah, one of the medical directors at Chicago Department of Public Health. I am very excited to have to introduce our guest today. This is Commissioner Chris Brown from Chicago Public Libraries. Commissioner Brown, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for making time out of your newborn kids and everything. Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Brown did mention something that I'll mention, since he did. But we did give birth to our second child recently, a little girl, and everyone's doing well. So now I have two little girls at home, and it's been chaos, but a lot of fun.
I know what that's like. Yeah. With my 2-year-old at home, it's it's controlled chaos.
You have
or uncontrolled chaos.
Well, oftentimes uncontrolled is absolutely correct. And you have a puppy, as I understand, as well, right?
Yes.
Adding to the chaos.
Exactly.
Commissioner Brown, anything else you'd like to introduce? Who are you? What do you do? How did you arrive here sitting and talking with me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super privileged. I get to lead one of the largest library systems in the world. Chicago Public Library, I think Chicagoans know it's a great library, but it also has an international reputation. So we've been a long-time international leader, whether that's our YOUmedia spaces, which are like, where Chance the Rapper got his start doing mixtapes. Mm-hmm. Saba, McJenkins, Noname, just like incredible MCs who have kind of found their out-of-school time space in our libraries. To like teachers in the library, we have a tutoring program, we have cyber navigators, to co-located libraries with the Chicago Housing Authority, just building library services into housing solutions to kind of bring resources into closer proximity to Chicagoans. So I have the privilege to get to lead this institution of 81 library locations and 1,000 Chicagoans, and it's an honor.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think, hopefully I'm speaking to the choir here, but, obviously for those who don't know, libraries are clearly more than just a place to check out books these days.
And I think Chicago is very unique in that our libraries are really this neighborhood model. Mm-hmm. It was, for the history kind of buffs out there, in the early 1900s, we had a city chief librarian, Henry Legler, who kind of put forward this model of like, we want walkable libraries in every neighborhood of our city. Mm. And so we have that 81 library location system because of that vision of wanting library service to be in this like walking proximity. And it's fascinating for me to think about all that we're looking at nowadays about walkable cities and quality of life. Mm-hmm. And that was something that we really invested in as a city over 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's, I think I take a lot of that for granted as someone who grew up around Chicago, and as someone whose family, our libraries are a regular part of our what we do.
Your branch?
Salter Library.
Okay.
So we're over near Lincoln Square, Albany Park, sort of right on the border. So we bounce around, but I guess that's interesting to hear that it sounds like Chicago is quite unique in the sense that our system of libraries is we really have something special here.
Absolutely. And then also that walkable access, I know we'll get more into like public health initiatives later on, but I think what it creates is this neighborhood community hub where Chicagoans can connect to all kinds of services, whether it's early literacy programs where kids are building that like joy of reading or student academic support, all the way to art access. So the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, our arts and culture partner, they've joined us in putting just incredible art into our locations. So like the Legler Regional Library in West Garfield Park has a Carrie James Marshall. Wow. And like in Elizabeth Catlett, Floating Families. We have multiple scent rocks. We have a Hebrew Brantley in Greater Grand Crossing. So we connect people to art, world-class art, right in their neighborhood. And then all the way to just our incredible programming. We're in the midst of summer. We have our Summer at CPL program with programming with our activity guide. So in that, there's all kinds of things for parents and kids to do over the summer. Also, a free pass to the Chicago Art Institute is in that guide. And so in that neighborhood, in all 77 neighborhoods, we have this incredible asset of learning, of access to broadband. We know we have neighborhoods where there's up to 40% are without broadband access, but they have a neighborhood library that can equip them to computers, Wi-Fi. And so we're just this real incredible neighborhood-based resource. And then not to mention we can't forget the books.
Those still exist in libraries, right? Yeah.
Over 5 million books that Chicagoans can have sent all around the city right to their neighborhood.
Amazing. And how tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get to be commissioner of this, incredible organization?
Well, it's a funny story. I almost didn't come in. It was in the middle of the pandemic. Okay. And I was the deputy commissioner in Silicon Valley. Okay. For their library system. And we had a recruiter who was like, "We've gotten your names from a few people throughout the country." And I was like, I'm not going to come work for Chicago because I lived here in my early 20s. And I was right out of undergrad. Okay. Like I was a literature major. I'm like taking like graduate courses on James Joyce and like 19th century Russian literature. And I thought I can't come work for Chicago Public Library because I applied for the most basic job at the library, which is to put books away. Yeah. And I never heard back. And I was like, I can't. That's too weird. I can't go run the library where I couldn't put the books away. But yeah, it worked out that way. Where came back and was really proud to join our team in the midst of the pandemic and such a difficult time for a lot of city workers, and to be part of that moment of showing up for our city, keeping services open. Yeah, it was a moment of pride, and glad that we're past it. Yeah.
So am I. Yeah, you and me both. So you do have some background as a Chicagoan. Did you grow up here?
I didn't. I grew up in Los Angeles, and then after undergrad, my wife and I, we went around the country, and we stayed with every friend we knew, whether it was like Austin, Texas, or Boston, or Montreal. We just spent a little time with them. And then we had a buddy who was living in Logan Square. Okay. And we stayed with them for a few days. And we probably spent our first 2 days in the city. One, we were blown away by the Blue Line. Like, the fact that you could get your pass and then have your like transfer, and like it cost like $2 at the time. It was something like incredible, and you could get back on within a couple hours. And then we went to an event at the Cultural Center, like our second night here, and it was some obscure French playwright free event, like packed, intimate little talk. And it was totally free. And then we went to Millennium Park, and I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know that Millennium Park was basically new. Yeah. But we went over there, and we saw some music in the park. Yeah. And we were like, this city is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And so we literally went back to California, And then maybe within like a week, we thought, do we want to move to Chicago? And so we moved here for about 4 years.
No kidding.
And
Okay.
it was a great experience.
Yeah. I mean, I've been, like I said, I grew up around here. I've been drinking the Kool-Aid a long time. But even this past weekend, we went to free public pool. We went to a free, block party in the Square Roots Festival that had, children's programming. It had incredible musicians, food and all that stuff. It just, every time I come across one of these days or these events, I'm just so proud of being able to live in this city with all its incredible resources. Yeah. Well, I think this is a public health podcast primarily. We talk a lot about, sometimes we talk about emerging diseases. Sometimes we talk a little bit more high level about policy or people who have various roles within public health. CPL, I think doesn't have the most obvious overlap with public health, but I think, looking past the immediate things of what a library is, I actually do think there are quite a few overlapping missions and overlapping goals that a library system has with, those goals that a public health department might have.
Sure.
Do you, speak a little bit about that, and then, maybe we can get into, I know CDPH and CPL have done some specific partnerships as well.
Yeah. I think just from a real foundational perspective, thinking about literacy and what goes into lifelong literacy and the importance of those third grade literacy benchmarks and how those impact graduation rates and how graduation rates impact your workforce trajectory. And we know the data out there about the impacts of below basic literacy on health literacy, on careers, on earning. And so from like a more like philosophical perspective, I think literacy is the equity indicator that can really bolster someone for the course of their life. And even in conversations with community-based organizations throughout the city, when we talk to stakeholders around violence prevention or safety, it's not lost on me that some of the insights and anecdotes that have been shared are about even from some of the founders who are now leading these institutions, are about their experience of learning to read when they got into the justice system, which I find ironic and fascinating.
Yeah. Complicated, yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have a major role to play in terms of lifelong literacy and learning, and that joy around reading, and how much motivation and intrinsic motivation plays in sort of that lifetime of learning. But then also in terms of neighborhood safety, like we have 81 locations. We have 1.9 million square feet of physical library space in the city that are all throughout our neighborhoods that can act as a safe space. And so I think it's much more in the public discussion the way that safety, gun violence is a public health issue. And so I think from that perspective as well, just having a safe space in neighborhoods is a huge part of public health. In addition to all of the development programs for youth, the after school spaces, I think between us and parks, we're this real asset in neighborhoods for youth to connect to pro-social engagement.
Right.
And then another element is also we're some of the only spaces that people who are unhoused can go, right? It's a space where it's public. You have access to broadband and computers. A lot of people who are unhoused or needing to connect to resources, we might be the only place that they can connect to broadband or computers to stay in touch with family or connect to city services. It's interesting. We just opened an art exhibit at the Harold Washington Library that was in partnership with the University of Chicago and their Inclusive Economy Lab. And the photo exhibit was about the supplemental income program through the city. The $500 a month supplemental funding. And when they looked at where people signed up for that program, the most common IP was from the Chicago Public Library. And so I think there's a lot of ways that we play this kind of safety net, like a public space for people to go to.
Yeah.
We have air conditioning in our spaces, super important in Chicago, where the weather is not the kindest, whether it's the summer or whether it's the winter.
Right.
And we know that a lot of people who, whether it's housing insecurity or just needing a place to be in public, they're in our spaces. So I think across the board, from learning to read to building a joy of learning to safe space for youth out of school to people who are more under-resourced or housing insecure, like we play this role for each of them, but in a very different way.
Right.
Yeah.
And there have been some specific partnerships as well. Like I think there have been partnerships to combat the opioid overdose epidemic, correct?
Yeah. So we partner with public health to be just a public space where people can access Narcan. And I think at first we were wondering, like, well, will this actually get uptake? And I think in the first couple of months we had over 2,000 units picked up. And I believe over 10,000 in the first year.
Yeah.
And I think that probably has a lot to do with it's a place that people can go that doesn't have a stigma around it.
Exactly, yeah.
You're not having to go to a substance abuse space or some space that's specifically about health. It's just a public space that removes some of the stigma.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I attribute the just incredible uptake and use around that. And then also, I know we've been working with the Department of Public Health on these vending units that really connect people who are unhoused with resources that are just common needs, like socks, feminine hygiene products, Narcan access. And again, when we got some of the preliminary data back, and we looked at, I believe there's 6 units across the city. And we looked at the 2 most in-use, high-demand spaces.
Yeah.
They were in a library, which I thought, well, the Department of Family and Support Services, maybe that'll be a little bit more in demand there.
Right.
But it was the public library's vending units.
Yeah,
and so I think when you look at that program and the high take-up of Narcan access, and then even the supplemental income, the Resilient Chicago pilot, you really see how a lot of people who are in need are in our spaces.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about co-locating libraries with the Department of Housing, or say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we have 4 Chicago Public Library locations that during Mayor Rahm Emanuel's term, they were able to utilize HUD funding to not just build public housing, or mixed use housing, but also to situate a library within those spaces. The idea being that are Chicagoans who need a little bit more support. Let's connect them in closer proximity to youth programming, out of school time programs, children's literacy programs, broadband access. Yeah. And they've done extremely well. We have 4 of them now. The latest one we did is in Altgeld Gardens. And not only is it a partnership with the Chicago Housing Authority, but they've situated, instead of housing on the campus, it's a child care center. So this whole idea of parents who are dropping their kids off for child care are then able to scoot right over and get their story times and get their summer reading program and all those early literacy tips that our children's librarians are so great at modeling and sharing with parents. It's just now it's almost built into their daily kind of commute.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's great. Have you been to every single library in Chicago?
Yeah, I've been to every single one. Yeah. And I feel just a privilege because it's really let me see the city.
Yeah, I bet.
And, from East Vodak to West Lawn to like Portage Cragen, Galewood. It's just really, as someone who's come back to Chicago, I think given me more insight into, what are the challenges that the city faces and what are the different kinds of needs. And it's just been exciting for me to get to connect with all of our neighborhoods and alders and our library teams, and that's been a fun part of the job.
Well, I can't imagine many other agencies or organizations having the extent of inroads into really every single community in Chicago that CPL has. Maybe a handful of other city agencies, but again, the fact that those are public spaces and such anchors of the community, I think, is so unique and such a way by which to connect with really all Chicagoans across the city.
Yeah, and I think one of the tangential benefits of that neighborhood built space that we have is as the city has initiatives to kind of resource different neighborhoods, we might not have a built space in every neighborhood. The Mayor Brandon Johnson and the team and public health, the way that they've been reopening or standing up more mental health spaces in the city. Right. We've been able to be part of that as well. So the Legler Regional Library in West Garfield Park, they now have a mental health clinician every week that West Garfield Park residents can come in and connect with. And we're able to kind of be that built asset so that the city can connect to Chicagoans because we have our community meeting rooms, we have our study rooms, and we're able to then utilize those to connect Chicagoans to city services, whether it's mental health services or voting on election day. That all happens at libraries.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Commissioner Brown, big visions for the future. Any wants or dreams for CPL in the future, near term or long term?
Well, we just released a capital strategy RFP, so we're going to be designing and revisioning what does the future of Chicago Public Library look like? Looking at the international library space, like what best practices do we want to take? And then also really thinking about how do we pull leaders from public health and parks and departments like the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities to really design these spaces so that they work for Chicagoans that we have the most difficulty reaching. We want to design those spaces so that they're as inclusive as possible, as representative as possible, culturally, service-wise, access-wise. And that's going to be a process that we kick off this year in partnership with the Department of Planning and Development. And that's one of those like stay tuned moments. I know we'll probably have some like fun activities for kids just to kind of get their insight as well. The next generation, like when your 2-year-old starts drawing, we'll want to get his sketch as well. see what the next generation is envisioning.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I hope you keep us updated. I'll do a rapid fire question at the end. But Commissioner, what are you reading right now?
Oh my gosh, it ranges from like the more, I feel like, esoteric, like high level books about First Amendment, book banning, just freedom of speech. There's a book out by, I don't know if you've heard of this before. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's by Patricia Evangelista. She's Filipino. My mom's side's Filipino. But this international bestseller, she's writing about the drug war in the Philippines and how dangerous it is to be a reporter right now. And so it's called Some People Need Killing. And the reason I'm reading it is because it's reminding me of our First Amendment rights in the U.S. and how we kind of just take it for granted. Yeah. Just being able to have a podcast about social issues.
Sure.
And have disagreement and have conflicting voices. And it's reminding me how incredible this country is and our society is when you look at the international landscape. And then I'm reading books about like penguins and lots of board books.
I've read the same book about what is it? The blub fish and getting up in the morning.
Peekaboo dinosaur, nerdy babies in space. There's a lot of that going on in the house too. So it's a real balance of like highbrow, baby brow. Yeah.
Well, Commissioner Brown, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you come back.
Of course.
And thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Healthy Chicago Podcast. This is Dr. Borah. We'll see you next time. And that's our show. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to rate and subscribe wherever you find podcasts. I'm Dr. Borah, and we'll see you next time.